everybody, welcome. I'm Jen Walinga, and I'm with Wendy Rowe, my good colleague, and we are excited to welcome you to our Thriving webinar today. And there's just a few details that we can go over here about how to participate if you've never used Zoom. You can ask questions in the chat, and Karen and Alana and Selena, we have a whole team here in the background who are going to be helping you out and responding or giving us a little note that they need us to stop for a moment and allow for a question so we don't blab on all day. So let's get started. First, we always like to start at Rural Roads by acknowledging the wonderful heritage we are lucky enough to be a part of, and to acknowledge something that's often been forgotten in our history in Canada and across the globe, really, that we're visitors to this land. We don't necessarily own it, and we weren't the first to arrive, and we really want to honor the history and the First Nations who were here a long, thousands of years before us. And so we happen to be on the lands of the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, and personally, I am on the lands of the Songhees out in Cadborough Bay in Victoria. And of course, I'm not on campus right now, but you can see a lovely view of our campus here. And I have to say, we really try to honor our Indigenous roots through our model and through our learning practice, by honoring the land at all times. And I think, as I've spent 20 years at Rural Roads, I've learned to learn from the place more and more every year. It has so much to teach us, right? Our history, the land, the beautiful old growth forest that we're surrounded by. We have a 1,000-year-old tree out there in the woods, and it's really quite an amazing, wonderful place to work. And so I'm actually going to pop out of the PowerPoint for a minute so that you can see that we're alive and functioning in our own little settings. And Wendy and I are going to introduce each other. And so I hope you can see me there. Who knows? I'm just trusting in the gods of Zoom. And here I am in my little office at home. My name's Jen Walinga, but I'm going to introduce Wendy. Wendy Rowe and I have worked together for many years. She probably doesn't even remember, and it was one of those things where she didn't realize she was being a mentor, but she was. When I was busy at UVic doing my doctoral dissertation, I had an opportunity to speak with her and possibly participate in a project. And interestingly, it kind of didn't work out, but it did later when I joined Rural Roads, and she and I became colleagues. Of course, she is someone I look up to so much. She teaches in the School of Leadership and has been there for many years and has done some fantastic things. Most recently, she's designed the Masters in Global Leadership. This is a program that invites leaders from around the globe, prominent leaders in their fields, to come together from all different nations and discuss leadership, practice their leadership, and hone their leadership skills with the support and under the guidance of Wendy and her team. And they travel across the world actually and hold their learning communities and residencies in different parts of the world. So it's quite an exciting program, and that's just one of the projects she's been responsible for contributing to Rural Roads, but also to the world. Wendy's a deep thinker, and we've done lots of work together around thriving. And so now I'll hand it off to Wendy and pass the ball into her court and see what she has to say about me. Thank you.
I am just delighted to be here. I had to make sure my mute button was off as we're all learning to navigate the Zoom world. So I'm very delighted to be here, and particularly because I am presenting with my colleague, Jennifer. And we're talking about a topic that is very dear to us. It's an area that we have done research in over many, many years. And it's great to share what we've learned with all of you, particularly at this time of the COVID pandemic. Jennifer is an amazing scholar. I had no idea that she saw me as a mentor. I have always looked up to her as well.
I'm just taller.
Jennifer is very tall. And not sure either, but Jennifer, she has a 30-year history in education, and she is, you should all know, she's a former Olympian. In rowing, she went to the Commonwealth Games and the World Olympics in, what year was that?
88, 92.
88, 92. And the women's rowing team won, which is absolutely amazing. And so Jennifer brings that experience of competitive sports to her academics, and her practice in areas of sport performance, thriving, and leadership. So even though she's a professor in the School of Communications, I always think of her as a professor of leadership, because she exemplifies leadership in every aspect of her life. So I could go on and on and on, but that's enough for now.
Thank you. An honor to work with you always. And thank you. We also want to acknowledge that we're coming from quite an unusual university, and we want to promote Rural Roads because it's quite a special place. It was designed 25 years ago, it's our 25-year anniversary, to address and support the needs of working professionals mainly. We have programs for undergraduates as well, but even then we expect some work experience so that they contribute different kinds of learning to the learning community, to their cohort and their program experience. And we also have a learning and teaching model, kind of a North Star that guides us through a lot of our work here at Rural Roads. Learning permeates the place, right? It's about teaching, learning, and research. Those all have to do with learning. I know I've learned more as a teacher than as a participant in courses sometimes, right? So I learned so much from our students. We're also a change maker university. So we have the Ashoka U credential. And here's a little picture of, part of our campus, but we'd love to see you someday when everyone's able to travel and visit. We're on a wonderful location, as I mentioned, but we can see the Olympic Mountains across the strait, and we're on the Royal Roads, which is safe harbor. It used to be a military college, and so it has this wonderful history as well. You can see that we highlight things like applied and authentic, caring and community-based transformation. And you'll notice that acronym spells ACT. We're all about practice and taking action and facilitating, cultivating leaders for positive social change. What a great time to be that kind of a university right now, where we are really experiencing an opportunity to revolutionize how we do things in the world during this great pause that is the pandemic. Wendy mentioned that I have a history in sport. In my sport, I have lots of sports that I love. I'm a bit of an addict, but I rowed for many years for Canada, and I still row as an old lady out there on Elk Lake in Victoria. I was out there this morning on some very calm water. That's our favorite water because you can truly relax and get quite internal. But I love the metaphor of water. We often use the metaphor of white water when we're talking about change, when we're discussing organizational change and leadership through change. And I identify, of course, because I spend a lot of time in boats, and the importance of being grounded and centered, whether it's white water or calm water. And the nice thing about calm water is you really can let go of all the craziness and chaos and crisis. You're able to really focus and get centered. And so it's not as challenging, but it's an opportunity to debrief, to reflect, to take a moment to really learn and distill what you're learning through any kind of experience. And frankly, though the pandemic is a crisis, it's also causing us to stay home, stay put, not move around as much. I haven't driven in weeks, right? So I think it is, again, a great metaphor of that pause, a moment to take advantage of this. It's not all that calm, but a kind of a calm water, an opportunity to be off of the usual trajectory of intensity and that hamster wheel of work to reflect. And we want to invite you into this webinar to also take that time. I would say I'm so proud of my students for carving out time for their own personal development and learning. And I'm proud of all you for signing up for something like this. It's a time for you to distill your your learning and really debrief some of the experiences you've gone through. And it's going to be quite interactive. So please participate. When we break into breakout rooms, it isn't a sign for you to adios, right? We're going to go out and come back. So don't leave. And I'm going to invite Wendy to talk a little bit about the schedule for the day. I can't see our notes, Wendy, so I'm just going to have to do cues like this if that's okay for you.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about, we'll review the whole area of culture, values, communication, and practice. Then we're going to talk about some principles of thriving, coping, and resilience. And that comes out of research that Jennifer and I have done. We've discovered that working professionals within organizations tend to react in patterns of either thriving or coping, which is sort of the norm, and resilient, or not coping. So we'll talk about that. Then we're going to actually share with you concrete processes and practices, mechanisms that you can use to help you thrive in your workplace, particularly during these times of disturbance, turbulence, sometimes crisis. So we're going to give you some real hands-on skills and tools to use. And then we'll end with talking about active recovery. How do you recover during times of stress and disturbance? Okay, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, this is just a little activity we have designed for you here that I'm going to ask you to, and I think you were sent the links, but I'm going to stop the share and go to a different screen, which is a Menti. And so you were sent, just go to menti.com, and then you enter the Mentimeter room, and there's a question there for you that, oh, hang on a second.
If you look in the chat box, you'll see the code number.
Yeah, thank you for posting that there. And there we go. Okay, got it. Just looking for my little connection. There we go. And so if you go there, yeah, you'll answer the question, what do you look like and feel like when you are thriving versus just surviving? You know, we know how it feels when we're just surviving. We're clinging by our fingernails. And when we're thriving, though, there are these other feelings. We feel like we're really humming along and growing and developing. What does that word mean for you? And this is beautiful. Thank you. So people are typing in there, and you can type in as many words as you want. And we're just building a lovely word cloud together, and it'll keep growing throughout the presentation, and it'll be captured, and we'll send it out with a link to the final word cloud when we send out the final PowerPoint to everybody as well in presentation and recording. Okay? So look at some of these wonderful words, right? Energized, engaged. I love the word engaged. For me, that means that it has meaning for you. You are hooked in. You are interested, it's appealing, whatever you're doing is meaningful for you. Usually it's also quite nourishing. So when we talk about engagement in an organization, it's because people feel like they have a role, they have a purpose, and they're engaged, they're committed, and they're going to start giving to the organization or giving to the project, right? As opposed to disengaged, where people feel like they don't care as much, they're not as valued, they just start checking out, right? And usually it means they're not thriving. So it's a pretty integral word. What I love about word clouds is it does a bit of an analysis for us as well, right? And then the numbers of time people add in their words, those get bigger and bigger. So a lot of people feel alive, engaged, connected, energized, happy, excited. And this is exactly what we're talking about, what we've discovered in the concept of thriving. It's slightly different than resilience or hardiness, which are other words that we discuss in this area. But you know, if you think about being hardy, it usually means you're a bit heavier, you're robust, you've kind of strengthened yourself, and you're able to kind of ward off some of the challenges. Whereas we're more interested in that white water, right? That you've got a good paddle and a good boat and you are humming along through that white water. You know how to navigate it. You know, you've got some skills, some knowledge, and you're very centered in the boat. So you're not going to flip upside down. If you do, though, you know how to get back upside, right side up again, right? You've got a helmet on to protect your head. You're ready to go and you're thriving through the white water. You're not simply just big and strong and sort of walking through it like Godzilla. And you're not scarred up, which is how I think of these kind of hardiness and resilient words. You're not so scarred up that you're tough on the outside and you're able to withstand the challenges. That's different. As an athlete, if I have a lot of scars and injuries, I'm less agile, less adaptable, and frankly, probably less sustainable over the long run. Eventually, those injuries are going to catch up with me. Okay. Beautiful. So we're seeing the word connected as well, inspired. These are definitely things that Wendy and I have encountered as we go. All right. So now I'm going to share the PowerPoint again. Is that working out okay, everybody? Or are we still seeing Google? Okay, no problem. I just have to switch my, I have to switch which screen I'm sharing. That's no problem. Here we go. Sorry, we're operating in about 6 different platforms. So we're always learning along with you as well and trying to figure things out. Cool. So thank you very much for playing. And that Menti is a cool tool. So feel free to use it when you're online. And I think I hand it over to Wendy here.
Okay, I'm going to speak to some foundational aspects of thriving. And they all have to do with your cultural integrity and strength. You bring yourself to your organizations, and you bring your values, you bring your practices, and you seek to bring integrity between your cultural values and your practices. So we talk about walking the talk, living our values. We talk about alignment and congruency and integrity. And this shows up in when you know who you are and you walk your talk, it shows up with energy, confidence, and security. And these are actually critical components of being able to thrive in turbulent times. So, you know, what are values? Well, values come from our culture. We've reflected in our culture. We communicate our values. We enact them. We live them, and we practice them daily. So think about your beliefs, how they feed into your values, how they establish your purpose and your reason for being, as well as your role in your organization. Here's just a demonstration of, this is a cohort that are working on the values of relationship. And of course, with the values of relationship is the notion of trust. And I think fundamentally, trust is an essential value that we bring to the workplace and is essential for learning how to thrive in the workplace.
And I'm just going to poke in because I love this image. This is Wendy's School of Leadership, and it looks like a cohort doing an exercise, maybe even at the end of the program. Everybody's dressed up a little bit, so maybe at their banquet, but what a beautiful experiential learning exercise. I really love this photo. I'm glad we were able to capture it.
Here's some of the dimensions. We've talked about them: shared focus, being efficient and purposeful, engaging in collaboration, seeking to build security and safety, balance, and we'll talk a little bit more about balance. And again, it speaks to energy, confidence, and with that, our ability to perform and be effective in our roles in our organization. So we refer to this as just cultural integrity and strength. You bring that to your work context, and it allows you to take those steps to thrive. And as we talk more about the practice of thriving, this will make reference back to these your cultural integrity and strength.
And actually, I'm just going to stay on that slide for a sec because I've really experienced this as both as a professor teaching in a classroom, but also working with organizations as a consultant. And it's definitely a measure of thriving. If I can look at a culture in an organization and how well aligned they're living their values, how much integrity and congruity I can see in what they say they value and then in what they practice, and within the individuals, but across the organization, how well they're communicating and enacting and living those values is often correlated directly to how well the people are thriving. All those words you said, they're connected, they're engaged, they're energized, they're happy. The two things go together beautifully. And then one image of it almost like a little house, you know, culture is your foundation, and it really has to do with that sense of cultural clarity and your values integrity. So we'd like to invite you to participate in another exercise. And I don't know where you all are, but I'm sure you could stand up at this point. And it's always healthy when you're involved with these kind of virtual learning experiences to get up every once in a while. Sitting is the new smoking for sure. So you really need to stand up, and you can all be nodding and smiling at me right now and not doing it, but I really would love it if you could stand up right now and try to balance on one foot. And that's all it is. It's not a tough exercise, but see what happens when you're trying to balance on one foot. Now, as you're doing it, and I'm going to ask you to do it for about 30 seconds, what do you notice? What do you feel your body doing, your mind doing, your emotions, your physiology? What's going on there when you strive for balance in a very literal way? And you can poke that into the chat, and anyone who'd like to share what you see.
Debbie says, standing like a flamingo.
Yeah, so you're beautiful when you're balanced. What else is going on? What's your ankle doing?
Go ahead and type into the chat box.
Yeah, what do you notice? What do you notice?
Clear mind. Parts of your body working together.
I see a lot of grounded and connected.
That's what helps you balance, right? When you're grounded, connected to the ground, to the floor. You can use your arms as a bit of a balancing, or you can actually have to reach and touch something like a desk and actually give yourself some support, which is part of thriving and part of finding that balance. And I just wanted you to go through that experience and really notice what's going on there. You're adapting, right? Usually with your ankle, it'll start shaking a little bit and you're adapting. But what helps you is that groundedness, the focus, being clear in your mind. All of those things are part of what Wendy and I have discovered in our studies of people who thrive versus just survive or not coping at all. And so you have the answer in your body, and you can reflect back on that little experience whenever you're feeling like you aren't thriving. Oh yeah, right? When I'm balanced and solid, I'm connected to my roots, my grounding, my values. It's exuded right through my body. I have supports in place. I'm clear. And I'm focused right on my actual task. I know what I'm here to do. And the same qualities show up when we do, when you look into research that's been done on engagement as well. Same thing. Thank you for playing. And so Wendy's idea was to look into who leads thriving. Who are these people? What are the qualities of a leader who facilitates, promotes, and supports thriving in the rest of the organization? And I think it was just a fabulous decision to focus on leaders. So not only did we start to understand what are the elements of thriving, like balance, cultural integrity, clarity of values, and sort of that groundedness. And again, just like in boats, we also looked at, well, what does it take for a leader to actually facilitate this? And this is really important work, I think, because it helps us share with you what you can do to promote thriving in yourself, but also to create an environment in which others thrive. And a lot of it has to do with developing the whole organization and developing the whole person, right? So thinking about people in terms of their social, their relationships, spiritually, what's important to them, what do they believe in, what do they love, taking the time to nourish and acknowledge that they are physical human beings as well with bodies that need nourishment and need breaks and need to stand up and all those kind of things. And then their mental health as well. And mental health is a lot of things. It can be feeling confident and esteem, and but also feeling that you have enough support to navigate all the challenges that we face in life, and everybody does, right? Or how to come back from a mental injury. Sometimes people who've been through something very challenging and traumatic, or encountered some kind of abusive experience or behavior, are injured mentally, right? So how do we address that? But also people's mental needs, their intellectual needs to grow and develop and think and critically reflect on things. And life is full of disorienting events, right? Disorienting dilemmas, we call it, in transformational learning. And so to accept that life is often going to be filled with challenges and crises. And that was our fundamental premise for Wendy and I in conducting this research, was to be acknowledging, first of all, that life is hard and the pace of work is probably not going to slow down anytime soon, and that we live in really complex environments. But complex doesn't mean complicated. So how do we help people navigate it? Not just harden to it or get strong and be able to fight it with more of a tough attitude, but to actually be able to thrive amidst adversity and challenge. Wendy, do you want to take over for a few?
Sure. So we're going to talk a little bit. So we'll move to the next slide. When we looked in our organization, and we were focusing on this particular study, we were focusing on managers, middle managers in many kinds of public sector organizations. And we found that there were three typical response patterns of these managers when dealing with problem situations, crisis situations. In many cases, these were downsizings of their organizations or reorganizations where people were having to be moved into different positions. Sometimes there were HR type crises. And amongst these managers, we found a few of them had this thriving response. And it was characterized by, despite the severity of the crisis or the disturbance, these individuals engaged with the issue. They brought energy, and they brought an active response pattern, and they said they were learning and growing in a way that benefited themselves and their organization. So they had a smile on their face even as they were trying to deal with a problem situation. Amongst our participants in the study, though the majority of individuals tended to respond to these situations of disturbance, of crisis, most of them responded with a coping response. And a coping response was a typical response of, I can get through this, I know what to do, I have the skills, we've got protocols. In many cases there are specific protocols, and they would enact those in order to solve or transition through the problem. Just as I'm sure many of you are dealing with the COVID pandemic in your organizations, following protocols that your organization has laid out or superiors have laid out. However, a coping response is simply a coping response. Some people use the term surviving. It doesn't provide much sense of satisfaction. People often describe being very tired, at times overwhelmed, and there wasn't a sense of accomplishment. They got through, they dealt with it, but there wasn't any sense of accomplishment. And in general, there was just a relief, it was over. And I think, for many of us, we are simply looking for when COVID is over. So that is the coping response, which is what majority people do. And then there are some, though, who are clearly not coping, who find the situation overwhelming. They become very distressed. They may even become angry or fearful. Amongst our participants in this particular study, these were individuals who said that some of them changed jobs or left their organization because they were not coping with the stresses and the demands of that job. So with the study, we wanted to look at how those, about a third of our respondents, how was it that they were able to thrive? How was it they were able to transition through a response that was more than just coping? And what we discovered that is more than just themselves. It is not a solitary response. It is a response that involves the whole organization. It involves people. There are processes and there are practices. And that's what we're going to talk about is how can you engage in a thriving response and rather than simply a coping or surviving response.
Back to me, I think. I'm just like the exercise queen today. I feel like we've kind of sorted out this PowerPoint in a funny way. I don't mean to be. I feel like I'm an aerobics instructor or something. Okay, here we go. Another exercise. So again, here's the link, and you can go to what's called a Padlet. We use it lots at railroads, and it's funny how we've always used it, but it's become such a great tool because it allows us to collaborate on one board together in a creative way and share our work with each other really easily. So it's been great. So if you can go to that link there, it'll be in the chat box as well. And you can put your hand up or you know, whatever, poke in the chat, turn your mic on. You can say some things verbally too. We're fine with that, and that'll be recorded in that way, but whatever you're comfortable with, or you can go to the Padlet. But we'd like you to share what are some examples of thriving behaviors or supports, things that help you thrive in your organization or on your team. What are some behaviors you've seen from leadership or others, colleagues, that have helped you to thrive? And Wendy and I have this chat all the time. We're like, are you thriving? And sometimes we are and sometimes we aren't. I don't think you can always thrive 100% of the time. But we're so lucky because we have this work we've done in this language we can share, and we can kind of check in with each other. And we also know some solutions, right? We know how important support is and how important it is that we play a role for each other to listen to the emotional response that needs to happen and acknowledge that as real, and then move into, okay, what can we do? Some creative problem solving strategies and creating some forums for an opportunity to share ideas, etc. So I'll stop sharing and we'll go to the Padlet, and then I'll share that so that we can see what's going on there. Okay.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we're using some of these tools is because they really are tools that help you communicate and work with your whole organization. And this is one of the basic principles that we want to communicate, that thriving is about collaborating and working with your whole organization. And these communication tools, particularly these virtual communication tools during this time of the pandemic, are really important to engage others so that we're not alone. We basically say being alone is the opposite of thriving. To thrive, you'll have to be with others. And so we thought we would demonstrate some of these tools that you can use in your workplace and with your work teams. So look, we've got some great responses.
So fun.
Co-creation, creating safe spaces.
And I think Wendy and I are probably going, oh yeah, we've seen some of this stuff, the emotional communication. Yeah, and this is these, you know, check. These are the things we found in our research as well. So you're very smart, all of you.
Valuing conflicting voices, listening to opposing opinions. Exactly. And I really want to commend whoever put that down, because collaboration does not mean that everybody has to speak the same voice. To collaborate means to bring people together and to hear all voices, and then to bring those voices together to solve an issue. But if you're not hearing all voices, you won't find those creative solutions to, you know, whatever the organization or you are experiencing. So yes, you have to hear all voices, and you have to work through them to get to solutions. Excellent.
Our personal health, our health officer here in BC is Bonnie Henry, and she talks about being kind, being calm, and being safe. And I just think those really resonate as well with the concept of thriving, the compassion. I'm seeing a lot of people put compassion up there, and being compassionate to yourself as well, acknowledging your biases, being compassionate, allowing people to express and be emotional, but also being kind, and being calm, right? So just, okay, yeah, we're going through this time, and now we have tools and solutions and each other to rely on and get us through this. And then this idea of safe, like it's really ultimately about everyone's well-being. In order for our organization to function and thrive, everyone in it needs to also be really healthy. So we've got to start there. I think a lot of the successful, thriving organizations through pandemic, we're seeing a common thread is that idea that they take a moment to get safe. They make sure their people are good and strong and safe and grounded, and then they start getting collaborative and creative with other organizations or amongst themselves, and they come up with cool solutions to still achieve their goal and their values and their purpose, but they make sure their people are good first and safe first. Just like Bonnie says. And I'm thanking the Padlet gods right now because that all worked out as well. So this will be captured.
I was going to say, notice that somebody put in the morning check-in, the team check-in as a practice, and said the first time it was odd, but it gets more normal. That's true. Doing check-ins is not something that is common in most meeting agendas. And so it feels a little bit like it might be a waste of time, but it's amazing how it grounds and brings people together in advance of a meeting.
Sharing food, crucial. You want people to come, provide some food. But that's part of that, keeping people healthy, right? And actually thinking about each other as human beings. I think we kind of giggle about it, but it's really very real in those check-ins with each other. And this is not soft. These are not soft skills. At Railroads, we call them difficult skills because they are, and they're often dismissed as soft or unnecessary. They are probably the most necessary thing for you to be doing. This is what we're discovering through all of our research studies and exploration of others who are working in the field. Crucial to acknowledge the human beings. And frankly, the pandemic is bringing that into crystal clear focus for us, isn't it? Awesome. Would anybody like to weigh in with their mic on and share a story or an example that they're particularly proud of, or would like to, that you think others could benefit from hearing about? Don't be shy.
I'm going to pipe in for a minute, not with the story, but just to mention, I believe you had said this Padlet is going to remain open. So if you want to continue to build on this after or look back on what other people have written, just know that you can take this link and use this as a resource.
Love it. Thank you, Alana. And what I love about this too, and thank you to Wendy for highlighting as well, that this is really indicative of the kind of sharing we like to do at Railroads, but it's such a great tool because it also highlights that, you know, we are a learning community. It's not just Wendy and I sharing information. We happen to have some expertise in some areas, but you all do as well. And something we always highlight with our students is that they're bringing so much from their different contexts, so much professional experience, and we acknowledge it for credit at Railroads too, actually, because it's learning. It's just as valuable as any kind of academic study you can be doing when you're having these professional experiences and learning look what you've learned, right, through all of your different contexts. And then the responsibility to share it with the community. It's great that you've learned it, but you know, really true learning happens when you share it across the community and you actually are a leader in facilitating development. in your social circles and organizational circles as well. And you've built on each other's comments as well. Thank you. Right. And so any comments, anyone to poke in, or, you can share in the chat as well if you have something you'd like to share there. People can see those things. All right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now and keep going. Oh, we had a hand raised. I think someone would like to speak. Is there someone there with a hand up?
Oh, hi. I was just going to share. My name's Rebecca McKenzie,
Yay.
and I run a not-for-profit organization called the Culinary Tourism Alliance. And my group typically shares 600 square feet. There's 10 of us. So we've all been working remotely for 3 months. And so much of what we do as a group is come together around food and drink. So in about the 2-week phase, one of our key partners is a young woman who has a company called Pluck Teas, and she makes amazing teas using Canadian ingredients that really showcase the terroir of Canada through her teas. And her primary focus was restaurants. And of course, with the closures, she lost almost 80% of her business. So what I decided to do was I asked each of my staff to tell me what their favorite Pluck tea was. And I sent tea to everybody at home, and we had a tea time, and we came together around that. And we spoke about it actually even on our social channels. And it was so widely spread that it actually boosted her sales so significantly that she's moved into a completely different retail space with direct to home delivery. So not only did we all have a great tea time and talk about our favorite teas, but we helped a small business pivot in these challenging times.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
That's a wonderful story.
Right on. Do we have other stories? People, thanks, Rebecca, for kicking it off, because, you're the brave one that now invites and opens the door to others. So thank you. Anybody else with a hand up? Share their story? No? Okay. I'm going to hand it off to Wendy here. She is amazing at speaking about the things that we've learned from our work.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk about some of the principles and specific practices that we have included in our model that we learned from our research. But I think you will recognize much of this because I can see from both the Padlet and from the Menti that you are using some of these, but perhaps this will provide a bit of a validation. Lost the screen. Okay, so the basic thriving principles are, there's 5 domains that we focus on in developing a thriving capability for yourself as well as your organization. And the first one is, we call it the positive emotional reframing. And this is how you respond to the crisis situation or the disorienting situation. We're now in, the pandemic. A lot of people, their response has been to, well, I'm just going to go home and I'm going to bake bread, or read or hibernate. Other people, though, said, no, I'm going to get over my fear. I'm going to get over my anxiety, and I'm going to find solutions. So that emotional reframing, and I'll talk more about it in a minute. And the other area is perspective. How do we see the issue? How do we define it? The third domain is our problem-solving response. How do we actually try to solve that problem or that situation? How do we take care of our personal well-being? And this is a dimension that begins at the beginning and it carries all the way through, even while you are changing your perspective and adopting a problem solving. And then the fifth dimension is focusing on what are the outcomes for all. So those are the 5 areas that we address in our thriving model. So just to speak more about the positive emotional reframing. It is natural when a crisis hits us, when a disorienting event occurs in our life, it is totally natural to have an emotional reaction. And I don't think we would be human if we didn't have an emotional reaction. Sometimes it's a fearful or anxious or oh no, this is a problem. Emotional reactions are normal. However, we need to begin to, in order to move toward thriving, you want to begin to appraise the situation and to transition from a negative emotional reaction to a positive emotional reaction. Some people get very, very good at controlling their emotions, recognizing the pattern, and taking steps. I mean, I know folks who, when something happens, they go for a run. And in that run, an hour, they're out, they manage to overcome their emotional reaction and move themselves into a new emotional state. Some people it takes longer. We're all different. It's a matter of recognizing your pattern of overcoming that initial negative emotional reaction and beginning to move into a more positive reaction. Part of moving into a positive reaction is having the confidence that you recognize that you can overcome a negative reaction, you have the capabilities and resources, and you have the power to address the issue. And that confidence then allows you to move into the next stage, which is in some of the literature, it's called a secondary appraisal, which is viewing the issue as manageable and solvable. I can deal with this. I can solve this problem. Perfect example that probably has happened to just about all of us is when you make a mistake on the keyboard and you lose your file. And, the first reaction is, oh no, I've lost my entire file. This is a disaster. I'm going to be late on my assignment, whatever. And at some point, as you begin to transition into a more positive emotional response, you reframe it as, yes, I can solve this. I have the tools to resolve this. I have a backup, or I can remember what I wrote, and it is solvable. It may take some time. The fourth part of this, reframing your emotional response, is to view the situation as having opportunities. Perhaps in the crisis, there is a recognition that the crisis or the problem is symptomatic of an underlying, what they say, elephant in the room. It's an underlying issue, and that maybe has not been dealt with. When it explodes or when we have to deal with it, it forces us now to have to deal with it. And if we look at it as, now we're going to deal with it, and that this is an opportunity for me and for my organization to develop, to bring together people, maybe build better relationships, and to address an issue that perhaps has been festering in the background for some time. So part of this positive emotional reframing is to eventually get to a point where you see opportunities, you see the silver lining, you see a potential benefit that may emerge from dealing with the situation. So the next stage of thriving is what we call systems perspective. When you bring a systems perspective to the whole situation, you are able to see that it is more than yourself, that it involves other people, and you begin to bring other people into addressing, understanding the issue, and developing the strategies. Systems perspectives allows you to see the interacting and extenuating factors that are contributing situation, so that it is more than just that immediate problem, but you're able to see the ramifications, perhaps the history of where that issue came from, even something like our COVID pandemic. The pandemic has a history of how we deal with health problems in the past, our ability to mobilize and respond to these very serious viruses, and our ability to deal with it or not deal with it is a function of both the history and, of course, all of the various stakeholders that are involved. Systems perspective involves carrying out a stakeholder analysis. Who are all the stakeholders that are impacted by the situation, and who are those who have some responsibility for the solution or its ultimate resolution and impact in the organization. So stakeholder analysis is very important, because none of these kinds of disorienting events, crises, problems can be solved by one person. Part of a systems perspective is actually seeing yourself and everyone else within the organization, and maintaining the well-being of the organization is as important as the well-being of individuals. So organizations are made up of individuals, while it's easy for individuals to feel, well, the organization's at fault and we're just going to blame the organization, that is no more effective than the organization blaming individuals. Part of a systems perspective is to say, the organization matters, individuals matter, and we are going to seek a positive image for the organization, a positive image for individuals, and positive outcomes for both individuals and the organization. So even with organizations that have some culpability, helping them build a positive image, in fact, strengthens their ability to take positive actions in addressing the issue. Finally, a systems perspective is understanding that the responsibility for addressing the issue belongs to the whole organization, as I've said, and that the organization as a whole, from the senior levels down to the the operational level of an organization, need to be mobilized. So it's not just a leadership issue. It's not simply an operational issue. It is certainly not just middle management who are often held responsible. Organizations that try to solve problems by simply firing people are not healthy organizations. They're not thriving organizations. Thriving organizations are thriving because their individuals are thriving, and the whole organization comes together to address the issues.
Thank you, Wendy. You know, I love listening to you talk about it because it reminds me too, and you know, we're constantly reflecting on this and trying to apply it in our context. And I've definitely been guilty of kind of blaming the organization, right? We tend to do that politically, municipally, in our organizations. So it's always such a good reminder. But I also want to highlight that, you know, these concepts sound great and they're theoretical. It's hard work to make them work in practice. And so I hope you're hearing a couple of concepts that you think, oh yeah, you know, what would that look like if I actually tried to involve others, or not assume it's the fault of the leadership, or take a moment to actually think globally about the organization as a whole, what's best for the organization as a whole, or what my role is, but also that I remind myself that compassion, I'm part of something bigger. What would that look like in your context, right? And I'm trying to visualize it in my team and program and then university as a whole, but also beyond that with other orgs. That's hard. And that's what we teach at Royal Roots too, that it takes a bit of work to pick up a theoretical tool and then use it in practice, because it often behaves a little bit differently than what you dreamed of idealistically when you heard about it. Oh, everybody's going to positively reframe. Well, it takes a bit of work. And we'll get there. We'll keep talking a bit about these domains. And then Wendy and I will share what you can do as a leader to facilitate what kind of forums and scenarios you can create to help these kinds of things become real, right? For people to be actually able to reframe, to take on more of a systems perspective, to be able to problem solve collaboratively. And a lot of the research I do is around problem solving. And it's tough stuff because we tend to, as human beings, be very, fight or flight. We tend to kind of fixate or we rush to solutions. So it also takes facilitation and leadership to ensure that people are able to actually problem solve collaboratively and effectively, especially under challenging, complex situations or amidst a crisis. So, a thriving individual or team or organization tend to immediately assume collaboration is needed. So building on what Wendy was talking about, they tend to form collaborative groups. They assume that, oh, well, we need more people to solve this than just me. A leader isn't the one who just solves the problem somehow magically by themselves. I doubt that's even possible. Usually they need that systems perspective to be able to generate a really good solution. In our minds, leaders are the ones who are able to facilitate this kind of thing. And so looking in your network of your networked system, right, and doing a bit of network analysis, finding those points of power. They aren't always the CEO or president. They're often people across the organization can really provide insight and leverage to solve something. So being able to look across the organization. I think that sort of assumes some relationships are in existence as well, which reflects back to the kind of people who thrive are the ones who understand they're part of something bigger. To be willing to take on a leadership role, even if you aren't the leader, you're allowed to lead things. It's okay. That's why I like communities of practice. You can just create a community like that without any permission. When you thrive, thriving individuals tend to be open, they're transparent, they share, they're authentic about their feelings and what's going on for them. And if you start reflecting on the people you see who are thriving around you, like Rebecca's story, they're the ones who are able to really just reach out and be honest about how they're feeling and what's going on, what the problem actually is. They seek calm. Again, that's the good old Dina Hinshaw, Bonnie Henry, these Jacinda from New Zealand, right? They're trying to create calm because people function better when they're just, so how do you do that? Well, understand that people are negatively impacted, then take some restorative actions to bring some calmness. Remind people we have time, here's some space to heal. Listening to people can really help, and gather some evidence and data from multiple sources, not just your own brain or one person that you tend to go to, but multiple. And consulting. I think consulting, gathering evidence, and that idea of a collaborative group all tie together really. And then to take some time to be innovative and try to be creative, take a few risks, because that's often what it demands. And I love Rebecca's story is so timely, because you could see that she allowed herself to be creative, and really it came from a place of caring for her group and trying to support this person who was struggling. And then look what happened. Pow, all sorts of innovation and opportunity emerged. And then to really follow through, right? Thriving individuals follow through and they implement. They work with others to ensure that we're actually trying to make it happen. But fundamental to all of this is this concern for well-being. And again, I reflect on this story of Rebecca's. It started with thinking about others. Bonnie Henry's message is about being kind first. Let's think about the fact that we're part of a larger group. Think about the people working frontline, the elderly, your family, your community. What can you be doing to make sure everybody's safe and okay? Instead of jumping to judgment and becoming, that person who's going to rat out someone who's not social distancing problem. She kept reminding us you don't know the whole story, take some time, be kind, but also fundamentally the pandemic's revealing to us that it's usually about health and well-being first. Same thing in any situation, health and well-being of the employees in an organization come first. You have no organization if you don't have a group of engaged, healthy people. So that has to do with attending to people's engagement, their sense of energy and purpose. But some aren't going to be very energetic in a crisis or complex situation, and you need to be conscious of that need to take a break and re-energize. There was a slide earlier that we kind of skipped over, but this idea that recovery is crucial to any kind of performance. You need to allow time to recover in order to actually perform. And recovery can be quite active. It doesn't have to be checking out and going to Y or something. It just means a chance to reflect, to download what you're learning, to take a little break or incubate on something, to nourish yourself by eating. All of these things are about personal well-being, but also about recovery. Remember that people, probably one of the most important things I've ever heard people say, or I've heard people say that is important to them, is a sense of accomplishment. They want to know their work matters. So thriving individuals know this. They intuitively connect to that and understand that everybody needs a sense of purpose, a role to play, that they're needed, that they're necessary, that they have purpose, and there's a reason for what we're doing. People need opportunities to grow and develop. And that can be in all sorts of ways. There's not one way to grow and develop, but each person has their own, their own needs in this area and learn in different ways. But people love to learn, frankly, and expand their ways of thinking. And then health, we talked about this earlier, the importance of good general health. So the thriving individual is thinking about broadly, systemically, they're problem solvers, they understand they're part of something bigger, they're thinking about well-being of themselves and others. It's a lot to ask, and I know it's a tall order, because we also layer on this idea of positive outcomes for all. So you're not just thinking about your own survival. We're thinking more broadly about probably the best scenario here is if the whole organization is thriving, I'm definitely going to be able to thrive as well. So it's a win-win, right? And you're always interconnected with others. I love that concept of interdependence. So you're thinking about positive organizational outcomes, not just your own little silo or your team or you as an individual, but think more broadly, and how can your learning help others across the organization? And really, it's about building those, strengthening those relationships, not creating antagonisms and creating an adversarial kind of culture, but understanding that we're going to get through this together. And so again, I'm loving the messaging we're hearing from our health officers around that. And I'll hand it off to Wendy to talk a little bit about how we can support thriving with our cultural artifacts. There's lots of different ways across an organization.
Yeah, this is just a kind of laundry list of artifacts, tools, actions that an organization can take, or you in a leadership role can enact to facilitate a strong support environment for thriving and for individuals to begin more effective thriving responses. So, you can see there's things like, how offices are laid out so that it promotes communication, websites and signs, messaging. Do the messages of the organization translate into the practices of the organization? Having a vision statement, having non-hierarchical power structures. Does the organization create capability for anybody in the organization to be able to speak? Is there upward communication channels? Are there downward communication channels? Are there lateral communication channels? Other artifacts or features in an organization might be flexible work hours. It's been quite interesting viewing how organizations have responded to the COVID pandemic, because some of them have suspended the whole notion of the 9 to 5 work structure. Recognizing that people are working from home, that as they work from home, they are grappling with having children at home and many other responsibilities. And so people are working at, organizations are understanding that their employees are working in all different ways, from 6 in the morning to 10 at night, and in different and using lots of different kind of tools. So these are just points for you to kind of look at and say, what are the support systems? What is our environment? How do we make decisions? It would be easy in this pandemic for all the decisions to simply be made by senior leadership. But no, organizations are learning how to use video conferencing and bringing their staff and their people onto Zoom sites and other kinds of audiovisual sites, so that again there are collective decisions, because collective decisions allow for system response as opposed to just a top-down spot. Guest speakers, these webinars are part of Rhodes' COVID response of bringing of allowing or encouraging its staff and its faculty to bring their expertise and share it with those at home. Lots of things around recovery. How are you going to engage in emotional recovery, physical recovery, exercise? So again, these are all things that you can think about. There is no one prescription, but it is this awareness that it is a whole organization response that needs to happen for individuals to thrive. Individuals cannot thrive by themselves, which is what Jennifer and I have found, that we have frequently remarked at times that situations have arisen where we felt it was all on our own back. And we very quickly discovered that when we think that we are the only solution to a problem, that we're not thriving. We may be very effectively coping, but we're not thriving. And we quickly discovered that the only way we are going to thrive is if we engage with the whole organization and help the whole organization to thrive. And in that symbiotic relationship between employees and their organizations, you also will thrive and feel much more engaged and excited and productive about your work environment. So this is, actually, we'll just bring all the 4 points up, yeah. So this is kind of a summary of the phases of thriving in a pandemic or disruptive. We refer to phase 1 as welcome reactions, acknowledging them, changing your perspective. That first environment is partly you, or that first step is partly you. It's also your organization. How do they react? We had a slide back where we talked about the organization being transparent and calm. And that's interesting because there are some organizations think that they cannot be transparent and calm. They think that to create an environment of calmness, you should hide the truth from everybody. And as we all know that when you hide the truth from your people in your organization, it does the exact opposite of creating calmness. It makes you feel more unsafe when the truth is being hidden. So if an organization is having financial difficulties created by that situation, in fact, the current, talk about it, be transparent, be open, but also communicate calmness that we as an organization will figure out how to address this situation. So that's all part of that perspective, creating a systems, whole organization perspective, dealing with the emotions, acknowledging the anxieties and the fears, and then helping people to feel calm. The next is to create that safe collective forum where you invite people to come together to speak up. Not shutting down voices, but creating collaborative voices. And that includes allowing the conflicting voices to speak up as well. There are times when the naysayer can be temporarily discouraging, but sometimes the naysayer actually has some truth. And by listening to everybody in that collective environment, where they feel safe, you can begin to move through it. Identify concerns, establish your values and the goals and expectations. What are we as an organization going to do? Where do we want to be? Reframing the systems, part of that solution is to look at what a systems response should be. What are the opportunities? Perhaps the crisis creates an opportunity to reorganize the organization. Perhaps the way it's been operating isn't the most effective. And in those conversations, you establish a new way or that we may want to look at our system in a new way. Collaborative problem solving. This is a big stage. It is not a single stage. It has many iterative components, because every time you engage in some sort of collaborative problem solving, you are also analyzing and gathering data. What would work, what doesn't work. You may try out a number of different strategies or actions. As you move into step 6, you generate action, and you test them out, you evaluate. If they're not working, you change, move back into collaborative problem solving, take another step, take another action, and you may even cycle back into phase 4, where you need to reframe, relook at the system, reconstitute a collaborative problem solving action, try out that action, find out whether it's working. And so those steps 4, 5, and 6 are often iterative, and as you find out what's going to work and what is going to help your organization, and you move forward. And as you move forward, individuals will be thriving and the organization will be thriving.
Thank you.
So that's a summary.
Thanks so much. And I'm in the School of Communication, and something we often forget, that you really need to plan communications around everything. So, you know, if you want to invite people into a problem solving group or create that forum, it's about also planning out how do we communicate, share this information. And Wendy started right with that idea of being transparent about some of the challenges, welcoming the reality of what we're experiencing. Thank you. And so please post in the chat some of the things that you see your organization do that is reflected in some of these concepts. Like, do you see your organization creating those safe collective forums? Do you see them welcoming initial emotional responses to challenging situations? We are living in a live case right now, right? And let's use it. Let's capture the learning from it. What's going on in your organization, in your family, in your community, in your other your other communities you might be involved in. Maybe you volunteer, you participate in activities. Those are all organizations too of some sort, in communities. What are you noticing? Are they allowing people to actually share and just be and respond and react to what's going on and creating space for that? Are we creating a collective forum where we can share what's going on? We did a lot of Blue Jeans meetings with our students. Both Wendy and I were in that program head role when COVID hit. And so it was just constant meeting with the student groups that we had. I think I had about 6 cohorts running in my program, and we just had lots of, and funny because the second years who I've known for 2 years now, you know, they were supposed to graduate this summer. And really when they came together in the Blue Jeans, they just needed to look sad with each other. And literally we didn't talk about much. They just kind of were sad, but together, you know? And we knew there was nothing we could do at that moment. We were going to work on some things, but it started with just being sad and then moving into and having that time together to share that sadness and regret and loss. And then we started to talk about, okay, well, what are we missing here? What are we going to lose by not graduating together? What are we craving? And that then helped inform the solutions going forward that Railroads prepared and generated, and started to reframe what graduation really could be and looks like. And we've seen that all across the world, right? Really creative ways to address the concern of those convocating individuals, whether they're in grade 4, 8, 12, or university. And some beautiful ideas have been generated after some collaborative problem solving. So what are your organizations doing? Post that in the chat and everyone can see the chat, and you're sharing your solutions there.
Could you also, if you don't have something from your organization, is there a takeaway from what Jennifer and I have covered? Is there anything that really that stands out to you that you would like to begin practicing for yourself, or practicing or encouraging others in your organization to practice? Is there a takeaway from this webinar?
Yes, yes, yes.
Importance of better together. I really like that statement. One of the things that we found in our research amongst these public sector managers was a tendency for some individuals to describe their experience as a very tough situation, but that they had been tasked to solve the problem, and that their organization gave them no resources, but they felt that they could solve the problem by themselves. And there was this tendency for some of them to hunker down and to be a lone wolf, as I said. And what was interesting was that there seemed to be almost an attitude that there was honor in solving it by yourself, that it would make them weak to reach out to others and ask for help, or to collaboratively solve the problem. And as we found out, is trying to do it by yourself is not actually the most effective way, and it doesn't result in thriving. It's usually just coping.
Beautiful.
I just want to make a note that, Jen, I think you had made a comment in the beginning about how the soft skills, we don't call them soft skills at Royal Roads, we call them the difficult skills, and how there's a theme of that in the chat box right now, of just like being authentic, being caring, communicating, you know. And I think everyone who's gone through the COVID-19 crisis, whether or not they're a leader or not, really recognize that they aren't soft, they are difficult, and they're really important. So I really appreciate seeing so much of that in the chat box. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely, and thank you for highlighting that too, Alana. I do think it's what we're learning through COVID, that when you see the kinds of leaders who are having an impact, enduring impact, and really seeing people navigating them through that whitewater of the crisis, we're seeing these kinds of qualities. They happen to be a lot of women as well, but I think that's neither here nor there. I just think it's the personalities and their ability to actually acknowledge and see what's being revealed as crucial, and then and keeping that calm, but also allowing the voices and not shying away. I've kind of loved watching the leaders who can handle the tough questions from the media and from the public, that are quite intense and harsh, but they leave space for it and acknowledge that, yeah, everybody's going through a lot and it's coming across quite intensely, but that's okay. It's not hurting me, and I'm creating space for that and just allowing it to happen, not taking it personally. And that's been a very effective thing to witness. I've been grateful for it. And now we have a bit of time for questions. If people would like to share their questions in the chat as well. Yeah.
Or if anyone wants to turn their mic on and share, ask a question that way, that's great too.
Mm-hmm. It helps if you put your hand up, then we know, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people are fighting to be on the stage. You can literally just turn your mic on and speak. We'd be fine with that. A shy little group.
I have a question.
Good.
Yes.
There is so many components that you have brought up today that I think are wonderful. I know one thing that I am wondering is if there's anything that, you know, a place to start, or, you know, kind of something pithy that if people were looking for one thing that they could really focus on to start integrating some of these, what would it be?
A big one for me, if you don't mind me jumping in, Wendy, is the reframing. I mean, that ties in with all that I've learned about problem solving. And reframing has to do with accepting that which you cannot control. All right. And I think COVID has forced us to up our tolerance for ambiguity, and it's what the world needs. Without it, if we can't just accept that we don't have all the answers, or that we don't have control over certain things, just like that white water. I mean, you can't stop the water from flowing the way it's flowing. You cannot control it. You often cannot control people. Just try to have a 2-year-old and you'll learn that lesson real fast, right? I remember this guy at preschool, just the dad standing there crying, please just put your shoes on. You know, he's not making that 2-year-old put their shoes on anytime soon. And we don't have control. So accept that which you do not have control. And then it allows you to completely see the problem in a new way. Instead of you hammering your head against what you want to control, when you accept, hey, this is our new reality, right? The new normal. Now what? What's at stake? What do we have to think about? What's new? What's gone? What's lost? Why are we sad about that? And then you can move into a whole new realm of problem solving once you let go of that which you cannot control. Positive reframing. I have a hand up. I think it's Rebecca.
I was going to say, I feel like my mom skills have come in big time. So your comment about the 2-year-old crying, what I've realized is that the approach that I've had to take with everyone in this time of crisis is as if I, not in any kind of condescending way, talking to my staff as if they're 2-year-olds, but listening and hearing them from a different perspective, like a parenting perspective, and understanding that I have a duty of care to protect them right now, and really focusing on all of the measures that I can take to make sure and recognize that they're in a coping versus a thriving. And then the minute I see any one of my 10 staff give the signs that they're coping, I ask them, like, as a collective in our weekly call-ins, and we have a weekly staff check-in that's just a check-in call, and ask them, like, what do you need? How can I make sure that you're okay? How can we lift each other up? And it sometimes feels like, you know, it's like taking your kids after they've had a total freak out and bringing them together and sit down and go, okay, how do we get back to good guys? So it's the same, except they're not freaking out in the same way as a 2-year-old, but it really is that sort of inherent parenting skill that I'm finding is helping me right now.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I think, Rebecca, that's a wonderful story, because I think dealing with children often, you know, give us that very hands-on skill in helping them transition their life stresses from, you know, spilling the container of milk to getting their first C grade or D grade, or failing an exam. Alana, your question was I was reflecting on some of the tips that I use and I share with others, and one of them is not reacting too fast, and how fast is individual, but if you're always in every time things are happening, you react very, very quickly, then the chances are is you're reacting and you're taking action on an emotional lane only. And that's often, it's, yes, patience, reflection, take a moment, go for a run, walk around the room. How many times have you done something at the keyboard and, you know, you have an emotional reaction? You read a message that just makes you furious. Stand up, walk out of the room, walk around the building, and, you know, whether it's 10 minutes to transition out of the emotional reaction to a more thoughtful reaction, or it may be several days or even weeks while you reflect and work through what something means to you. But not reacting too quickly is a very good piece of advice, I think, for everybody. The other is don't sit in it alone. Talk to somebody. You may need to talk to somebody just to help you through that reflection phase, or you may talk to somebody to begin to problem solve. There are many levels at which you may talk to somebody. So we know from the literature, but we also know from ourselves that social supports, colleague supports, organizational supports, people to talk to, help us to reframe. They help us transition the emotional reaction. They help us to reframe. And of course, they are critical in implementing action strategies, solution strategies. So talk to somebody right from the beginning.
And on that note, I think we can wrap up a couple minutes early, but that's okay. And we invite you to stay connected, right? We are available via email. I'm on a couple of social media sites as well, but you can reach us through our email very easily, or I think through our bios as well on railroads.ca. And we welcome any kind of connection, because connection is crucial, right, to any kind of thriving. We need to feel our supports and feel our community and understand that we are part of something bigger. It can be a little overwhelming to be part of that big system, but it's also comforting to know that you have a community around you, and that is central to what we believe in here at Railroads for sure. And any final questions, please poke them in the chat. We have a couple minutes, but otherwise we'd love to hear from you anytime. I want to thank the team, Alana, Selena. We had Karen Sequeira here, and Andrea Torres, and of course my colleague Wendy, but all sorts of other people in the background making this possible. God, aren't we just so lucky to have this platform?
This,
with you, right?
I love the acknowledgement, Jen, because it is our technical teams, our marketing teams, our student teams that have made it so much easier for us as faculty and for students to navigate the changed world of education at Royal Roads. It's been totally impressive to see the university mobilize, from the president through every single department. It happened immediately. We had courses that went from face-to-face to online, and our technical teams, our marketing teams, our recruitment teams, our student teams, and faculty, we all work together in this collaborative way to continue to do what we do best, which is education, but to do it in an environment where we felt like we were succeeding, where we were making a positive difference and making the learning environment still totally rich for students. So yeah, thank you.
And thank you to both Jen and Wendy so much. There was so much insight in this presentation. It was such a pleasure to be on it, be part of it. And I want to thank everyone who came today. All of your thoughts and insights were wonderful, and hopefully we can continue to build on these ideas as we continue to navigate this situation that we're all in.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody, for coming. We really
day.
appreciate it. Bye-bye.